All right.
What is up, guys? It is Drew from the Sober Fix Podcast here with Mark Kneebone, Steel City Roundtable Podcast. Mark, what's happening, man?
Hey, what's up, brother? Good to see you again, man. I've been looking forward to this all week long.
Yeah, me too. And just for anyone listening, me and Mark, we've done some podcast stuff together. He's out in Pennsylvania. I'm out in California. We wanted to collaborate and just get some stuff going, dive into some topics of addiction, sobriety, making comebacks in life. And we came up with the idea. It seems that there's a lot of people passing lately. Just there's been people in my life, there's been people in Mark's life, and it's just something we go through. It's something we go through in addiction. It's something we go through in recovery. And me and Mark have just been talking about how it's something everyone's going to have to face. And it seems to be, it's a hard thing whether you're using, drinking, or sober. Don't you think, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's, for everybody, it's different, right? Loss is loss. It's not something we look forward to. It's not something we want to deal with, but it's just part of the game. This year alone, I've lost two people. My really close friend, Kenny Finnegan, who was one of the co-creators of the podcast. I've known him for 20 years. He got killed on his motorcycle in June. And then just a couple days ago, my stepfather died. And this is the man that raised me from the time I was 4 years old. So he literally is the only father I've ever known. So it's been a rough year for me with loss. And I think it's good that we're going to talk about this today because a lot of people, I don't know about you, Drew, but I know a lot of people just bury this shit down and don't talk about it. So I think this is like therapy for me this week to have this conversation, and hopefully we can, reach somebody out there that's suffering or that's going through things that we've gone through, and we can help them out a little bit. So I think we're onto something here. I think this is going to be a great project.
Yeah, I agree. And again, man, I've told you before, I'm sorry for your loss. I don't know. It's one of those things where, obviously we know that everyone one day is going to pass, but you just it doesn't happen every day. And it seems that although we know eventually we're going to go, that doesn't make anything any easier. And it's always a surprise. And it's something that I used to always drink over. I drank over anything, but someone passing, that I used as an absolute excuse because I just could not deal with it. It's painful. It hurts. I remember being in misery of losing my friend when he took his life years ago. And it's just one of those things that, I don't know, man. I feel like everyone's going to deal with it in recovery, and it doesn't mean it's easy, but I appreciate you, agreeing to talk about it,
Hell yeah. There's a huge world. It's a dichotomy that's insane. You've got polar opposites. You've got how you act in addiction, and you've got how you act when you're sober. You mentioned that, you had a friend die. Were you in addiction when he died?
Yeah, I was in addiction. He was in addiction. He was going through some issues with his girlfriend. He was trying to come off certain substances, and he took his life in his parents' garage. And I knew he was struggling, but I didn't know to that degree.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. My dogs are not leaving me alone today. You got Dakota and Maisie. They won't leave me alone. I can't even record a freaking podcast for an hour. So let's talk about this. So this is a great way to start it. You were in addiction when your friend took his life. He was dealing with his own demons and unfortunately lost that battle. Maisie, knock it off. What was it like? Like, how did you deal with it while you're in addiction? And how do you think you would deal with it being sober as a difference?
Yeah, I remember hearing about it. I was in the throes of addiction, but I just happened to be at a sober living at the time. So I was technically sober, but only a couple weeks. And I remember being at the sober living, and I'm walking home from job search one day, and my dad's there. And I'm thinking, and my dad, I hadn't seen much of him over the last couple of years because of addiction. We normally have a great relationship, but up till that point, I was getting high, and he just couldn't be around it. Yeah. And he was parked outside, and it just seemed strange. I was like, what is he doing here? Why didn't he call me? And he had heard that my friend had done this, and he knew that I was freshly sober, and he felt like he needed to tell me in person because he was scared for me. He knew that I wasn't going to react well to it. And I remember trying to stay sober during that time. I remember trying to share with people. I didn't have much of a foundation in recovery, but it got so painful after about a week that I ran right back to the drugs. So to answer your question, I tried to fight it off, but the demons were on me. They were telling me, you feel terrible right now, and the only way to feel temporarily a little bit better is to go reach out for those drugs or pick up some alcohol again.
And how'd that work out?
Oh, it was terrible. I remember sitting at, and I was a pallbearer, so I was one of the guys that's carrying the casket at the funeral, at the burial. And I remember sitting there, and I'm seeing his family, and I'm seeing a lot of our mutual friends, and he, he took his own life, but a lot of it was directly related to the pain he was going through in addiction.
Yeah.
And here I am trying to cope with his loss, and I was high on the same drugs that essentially led him down that path to take his own life. I've never felt worse in my life, because I'm sitting there and I want to cry and I want to feel the emotions, and I'm just numb. And I'm sure people could tell that I was high. It's disrespectful to his family. I carried a lot of shame and guilt over that. One of my biggest resentments toward myself as I started to get sober was continually thinking about that situation.
I mean, so you brought up something really shitty. I'm not gonna lie, and I'm guilty of it too. You said that you went to the drug, and it's basically the same shit that contributed to your friend killing himself. Like, isn't it insane how you could be sitting there mourning somebody who's died because of their addiction and their mental health, and then you're going to use the same shit? Like, your first thought is like, hey, it killed him. It sounds like a fucking great idea. Let me put some of that in my system right now. It'll make me feel better. It just shows how crazy we are in addiction, where, you know, I like to say that our brain takes a ride and our body runs the show. Like, our body says, hey, I need this. I need this right now. It's the only thing that's going to make me feel better. And then you do that shit. And then when it wears off, like, you feel like the biggest pile of shit on the planet, because you're like, this is my boy. This is my fam, and he's gone now. And the way I approached it was to get fucked up. I've done the same thing with booze. I mean, booze was my thing. I went to funerals hammered. I've visited people in the hospital hammered. It truly baffles me how we can be so tied up in addiction that we'll use the same shit that just killed our friends.
Oh, it's absolutely insane. And I mean, you said it. It's insane. And any normal person or someone that doesn't suffer from mental health related stuff or addiction related stuff would look at that and say, how is that possible?
Yeah,
How
what did that make?
how are you, like, do you have any respect for yourself? Do you have any respect for your friends? It's hard to, and I get it. I get where they're coming from.
Yeah.
It's something I look back on, and I just kind of cringe over it, and it took a lot of work for me to really to get past that stuff. I held stuff like that against me. But see, you know how it is. It's the longer I hold that stuff against me, the more I'm just trying to give myself an excuse to continue to drink, and I'm staying in that same cycle.
Hold on, I gotta pause this thing for a second. I'm gonna step away and then I'm gonna edit this out real quick. Hold up. These fucking dogs. Please, get in.
They're like, "Hey, what you guys doing over there?"
Oh my God, these dogs, they drive me nuts. I may leave this shit in there, but hey, folks, if you have dogs and you want to do a podcast, put them in their fucking cages. Because otherwise they run around and tear your shit apart, knock your cameras over, fucking Jesus H. Christ. All right, back on track. So dealing with the close friend dying, like I said, I had two people that were close to me that meant a lot to me die in the last 12 months. And, there's no way I think I would have came back from the first one when Kenny died if I was drinking. I was lucky enough to be sober for both of these. Um, and it's not that I'm heartless. It's not that I'm cold. It's not that I don't have feelings, but I'm finding that I'm able to compartmentalize and logically think through what's going on. Now I know for me, when I was drinking, I couldn't think logically. Like, I was like you. The first thing I wanted to do was get that booze in me to get myself back to square zero, ground zero, and be able to function. Like, now, I can't imagine what I would have done, with Kenny, let alone my dad dying, in the same 12 months if I was drinking. It's hard enough sober, but, what do you think are some of the big differences of, us compared to the normies, the people that don't have an addiction or mental health issue when it comes to dealing with death?
I feel like they just, I'll say they, as because we're talking about people without addiction. It just seems that they are able to deal with the grief process a little bit more head on. My thing was always avoidance. I was always trying to control and manipulate my emotions, and it's just not how life works. I was following this false idea that I have to feel good all the time. And to answer your question, it just seems like people that don't turn to drugs or alcohol to cope with loss or grief, I mean, at times maybe they're feeling it worse than we are because we're able to temporarily numb for a little bit. But I think they're able to actually take part in the grief process. See, because for me, it was avoidance, continue to drink, try and forget about this, act like it's not happening, be in denial, and try and rationalize why I need to drink. And it seems like it hindered my grief process because what would happen is I would continue to stack up all these things that I was avoiding. And for me, a lot of times, my drinking and using, the run that I would go on would end up resulting in me having to go somewhere. It was either detox, it was either treatment, or I would end up getting arrested. And then I feel all the grief all at once. Now I'm feeling the grief from the friend that took his life. Now I'm feeling the grief from me drinking over it, me being high or drunk at the funeral, me pushing everything aside, and it would just hit me in waves. So I think, as a long answer, I think that those that don't deal with addiction, I mean, everyone has their different way of dealing with grief, but I think they are able to take part in the grief process a lot more fluently, a lot more naturally, versus me who puts it off and then has to deal with that plus everything else all at once.
So kind of like, the folks that don't have the addiction or the mental health issues, they can face it head on. They can take it on the chin and begin to process from the very get-go. Whereas you and I and other addicts, I'm never going to say everyone, but, for me, I couldn't process. I couldn't even start to process. I just buried it down underneath the booze, and then it came up 6, 7 months later, and then I'd lose my shit and I'd go drink again. So I think a big point you brought up is, and tell me if I'm wrong, I think what we're saying here is that, normal people, the people that don't drink like us, and the people that don't use like us, and the people that don't want to kill themselves, they begin to process early on, even if it's just a little bit, but they accept what's happening on its face and go, hey, now I got to do something about it, right? Like I gotta come to terms with it. Whereas we hide behind our addictions until we have nowhere else to go, and then we deal with it.
Exactly. No, that's spot on. And I've found throughout my and kind of in this recovery process, I've found that I can't outrun myself. I can't outrun my problems. So in the beginning when I would drink, I was able to drown out whatever was going on. That's what I loved about alcohol and drugs. They worked. In the beginning, they worked for me. It didn't matter. I could have the worst day in the world. I could lose someone. I could get fired at my job. I could have arguments with people all day long. As long as I had myself alone, away from people, was able to isolate and had a bottle or drugs, I would feel okay, at least that night. And eventually what started to happen is I couldn't outrun myself. It seemed like the alcohol and the drugs towards the end were just not doing the same thing that they did for me in the beginning. I don't know if you ran into that, but for me towards the end, it all changed. It was like, what happened to this magic elixir of life that alcohol once brought me?
Yeah, when I drank, I drank for 30 plus years heavy. The last 3 years of it, I was drinking like half gallons, like just pounding booze. When I got to the point where I was sitting in my apartment crying and wanting to shoot myself in the head, um, it had gotten to the point where, you know, and I'll give you an example. A regular day, a regular Friday for me, my Friday at work was wake up hungover, go to work, have panic attacks all day long, have anxiety attacks all day long, get off work after like 12 or 13 hours, run straight to the gas station, get like 2 pounders, chug those on a half-hour ride home, and then just rip into bottles and keep drinking until I passed out. Like I didn't get drunk anymore. Like it was like sober and passed out. There was no in between. And, at the end, I was just drinking to stop the shaking, because my anxiety was so, how it is, you go on a bender, you come off of it and your anxiety's shot. Like your mind is shot. It's worn out. It's tired. And I would just freak out and shake. And it wasn't withdrawals. It was just my nerves were shot. So I would just drink to not shake and to not have panic attacks. So yeah, at the end, it was medication that was, you know how they say every time you relapse, it's worse. You go out harder. Every single time you go out harder. And I got sober a couple of times. And the last time I went out so hard that I think the only way for me to end was to die, honestly. Um, and thank God, something had a bigger plan for me. But yeah, I mean, it was a nightmare. Every day was a nightmare. Like I say that my worst day sober is better than my best day in addiction ever. Because, with the deaths and what's going on, like at least I'm dealing with it. At least I'm facing it head on. Um, and I'm realizing, and I think this is a big thing that we forget in addiction, is that we have people around us that are willing to help us get through shit. Like this is big for me today because, you and I have become friends just talking around on the phone and shit. And it's good for me to talk to somebody about what I'm feeling, Um, I'm pretty fucked up about it. It's my girlfriend's out of town and it's just me here with the dogs and, I'm all by myself. And like, this was a perfect opportunity for me to relapse. 100%. This is the recipe for relapse for me. And I haven't, which is amazing. So, um, I'm like you, I don't want to go back to that point where, everything I did was to drink and my life was so miserable that I just didn't want to be here anymore. And I think that's one of the things that we fall into as addicts. And I think this is one of the things that normal people don't understand is that it's not like we choose to be this way. It is a disease. The choice we make is to have the first drink or to have the first line or to have the first bag, whatever you're using when we're in our 20s or whenever the first time we use it. I think we're all genetically designed as addicts and alcoholics. I think we are genetically designed to have uh, addiction in our system. I think everybody has addiction in their system. I just think that triggering events happen in the course of our lives that put us down this path. And once we take that one drink at 16 or 17 years old, we've opened up the door to Pandora's box and that gene kicks loose. I don't think everybody deals with it. I think it's in everybody to be an addict and to be an alcoholic. It's just that, some people don't have those triggering events that get them on that road. They deal with things better. They deal with things differently. I think a lot of times, it's unfortunate, but for me, I can tell you the time. I can tell you when exactly I started drinking and how it blew off right away. I just think that we're all capable of falling prey to the disease. I think it's in every human being. I just think that some people are lucky and some people aren't. But it's not our choice to be this way. It's our choice to have the first drug and have the first drink. And once we do that, we open the door and it's over.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool point too, because I think it's easy for someone who doesn't battle addiction, and let's say they're driving to work, and I see it now today, and you look over and you see someone on the street, maybe you see a group of people, and they've basically built a little tent city on the street, and you see a bunch of homeless people running around, and sometimes you'll openly see them hitting, in California at least, sometimes you'll see needles on the ground, you'll see them
Mm,
openly using drugs.
yeah.
And I think it's easy for someone to look over and say, why would anyone do that? Like, why would you want to grow up to be homeless, to be on the street, to have not showered for weeks, to be underfed, to be using drugs in front of people out in public, to probably be getting arrested left and right? And I think you bring up that great point of those people didn't sign up for that right away. When they were 16, 15, 14, 13, 18, whatever age they started at, it's like, think of everyone that had their first beer and didn't turn out to be alcoholics. Maybe that's just all they did. They picked up that drink early on, and it's so. I think it's a good point to remember that when people are on those, when you see them in I call it the stage 5 of addiction, the last stage, the hope to die. You are drinking because you absolutely need to. You are doing everything you can. The big book says to blot out our existence. I think it's important to remember those people didn't sign up for that. They have to take some accountability for their actions. I always have to take accountability for my actions in addiction.
100%. 100%.
But at the same time, you don't just go from stage 1 to stage 5. It's a process, and I think you're right. I think more people are susceptible to it than others, but I think everyone has the potential for it to happen. And I just think that's a great point, Mark.
When I was a cop, I tried to get sober in 2017. And when I went to rehab this last time, I never had that opinion before. Like, I was always like, I'm a drunk, I'm not an addict. Like, right, I drink too much, I'm an alcoholic, it's no big fucking deal. And then you go to rehab, and you go to a rehab where it's not like a specific sect of the community, it's everybody. There's federally indicted drug dealers, there's prostitutes, there's murderers, there's thieves, there's all kinds of shit in these rehab centers, there's doctors and nurses, and you go there and you're like, I'm just a drunk, man, I'm not like these fucking people. And then when I leave, one of my best friends is a federally indicted drug addict, a drug dealer. Like, it's insane what you see in rehab. And by being around all these different people, like, I started to see, like, I'm a very cerebral person. Like, I like to think things through. I like to dwell on them, get manic, but whatever. And when I was in rehab and I'm sitting there talking to these people and I'm listening to their story, and I'm not listening to the subject so much. I'm paying attention to the patterns, and they're all the same. The only difference from me and the guy that's on Route 51 in Pittsburgh with a brown paper bag wearing clothes that he's had on for 6 months, the only difference is that I had better options in my life. I had a good job. I have a good job. I have good people around me. Like, I have a support network. Like, I wish people would cut some slack to these people that are out there struggling in the cold all winter long. I'm not saying give them money, but understand that, this isn't their first choice of lifestyle. They lost everything. We are lucky enough that we straightened our shit before we lost everything. That's the only difference. We could be that person on the street underneath a bridge, living in that tent city, openly shooting heroin. We could be that person. But it's a matter of circumstance. Some people get lucky in addiction, some people don't. We've been lucky enough to have opportunities, multiple opportunities to get sober and to finally make it and be in that 2% that stays clean. It's so upsetting to sit there and think, like, I think that's one of the biggest things that I think about whenever I think about drinking is, like, I'm that far away from being that guy on the street, because when you start not giving a shit about work and you start not giving a shit about paying your bills and you start not giving a shit about cleaning yourself, like, where are you going to end up? Like, that's just what's going to happen. You're going to end up to be that same guy. I know I kind of get off a little bit on that, but, to me, I wish people would understand once again that this is not the lifestyle we chose for ourselves. We did choose to have that first drink, and we did choose to, continue to drink or continue to use. But at some point, and I think this is very important for the normal people to understand, at some point the body takes over. The body just says, I need this. I don't care what you're telling me. I don't care what your brain says. Fuck your brain. I need this, otherwise I can't function. And, it's medical facts. If you do the research, if you check into addiction, why that's why they call it, what do they say, an obsession with the body, illness of the mind. Like it's exactly what it is. It takes over every aspect of you, and, going back to what we started with, dealing with traumas and loss. How can anybody deal with a significant loss in their life if they can't even understand what's going on in their own head? They can't even understand why they're doing what they're doing, let alone deal with the fact that somebody they care about just died. It's almost like a cartoon. It's not real.
Yeah, and that's another great point. I could not deal with what was going on around me. I failed to acknowledge half the stuff that was going on around me in addiction because I had basically this magnifying glass that was on the next drink, chasing the next high. And that's why I love and I relate to this, when people say that it is a selfish disease. I personally was very selfish in it. Everything that I was thinking about, everything from the second that I woke up for me revolved around, and like I talked about before, me trying to feel good and me trying to get mine. I need to get high. I need to find alcohol. I need to drink. And to your point, it just made it to where I couldn't really, I had no more energy to deal with anything else going on around me. If I lost someone, I had to just put that aside. Like, I'll deal with that later.
You just hammered it down. You just hammered it down. I just couldn't deal with anything else. I was so tired up in my own shit that nothing else could get through. Like, I think that's so surreal. The mind is so strong. The mind will tell us to do the wrong thing over and over and over again. And that one thought that says, hey, this is a bad idea, we just wash that away. How many times did you sit there and go, I'm not going to use today. I'm not going to use today. I'm not going to use today. I'm not going to drink today. I'm not going to drink today. I'm not going to drink today. And then a half hour later, what are you doing? Drinking, using. It's insane. By the grace of God, we're both still here, and I'm grateful that you're here because I think what you're doing is amazing right now. I think people can really relate to your story, especially when you talk about the two-stage addiction, alcohol and drugs. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's crazy. I want to go back to this death thing though. How do you deal with loss and trauma now? Like, tell me your recipe for what you do to get through when something bad happens to you or to someone around you, and how you stay out of addiction, how you keep from going back.
Honestly, for me lately, the things that I do on the bad days are things that I've learned to do on the good days. It's been consistency for me. People say training your feet. People say putting one thing in front of the other. People say getting back to basics. I make sure, because my tendency in addiction and my default in recovery, when something bad goes on or I get super stressed or I'm battling depression, my first thing that my head is telling me to do is isolate. It's telling me I need to get away from people. I need to deal with this on my own. I need time to think. And that may be true. I may need some space here and there, but I have to combat that. I have to make sure. For me, it's going to meetings. I know everyone doesn't like going to meetings, but at least contact people, at least message people, at least give people a call. Basically, I just do the same things that I do on the good days, but I make sure that I get there consistently. I make sure that I'm talking to people. Sometimes it's driving in the car at work and listening to podcasts. Sometimes it's listening to speaker tapes. Sometimes it is reading books. Sometimes it's as simple as going on social media, and I'm sure you get this too, but our algorithm is probably all sober shit because of the stuff that we talk about and the stuff that we post about.
I hate cops.
So it's like, that's funny. So I guess my answer to that is I just stick to the basics. There's some things that I started doing from the beginning, because the thing for me is my life has changed so much since it was an addiction. And I think about this a lot. There's probably some things that are part of me staying sober or part of my recovery program that I could do without. Like I could probably maybe, I'm almost at 5 years clean and sober. There may be some things that I could potentially take out of my recovery program and free up some time to do maybe some different fun shit or a different hobby, or maybe put more time into the podcast. But the thing is, I just don't know. I'm scared to take certain things out because everything has worked so well up until this point that I don't know what I would take out. So I don't mess with the recipe. I just continue to do the same inputs I've been doing for the last few years. And that kind of thing just helps me get through those hard times. But I would say for me, number one, making sure that I do not isolate. Because when I'm going through pain and I'm isolating and I've cut off communication from a lot of the people that supportive people and mentors and friends like you and other people, when I start cutting off that communication, that's when my mind starts to take over, and it'll tell me some far out shit. It'll give me some crazy solutions to deal with the pain that I'm experiencing.
I think you said two really important things there. The first thing is you do what you do on good days. I think it's very important, like I meditate, I do box breathing, I listen to binaural beats and stuff like that to calm myself down, but if I don't do that on the good days, and I just do it on the bad days, then my brain automatically associates that with bad shit. And I think it's really important that whatever recipe for recovery and sobriety someone has, it needs to be something they practice on the good and the bad days. Because if we just focus on the bad days, then we start to get that negative association. And then it's like, what do I do on the good days? So I think that's very important. The other thing is you mentioned isolation. A lot of people don't understand when an addict isn't answering the phone, it doesn't mean they're automatically isolating. There's a fine line between, hey, thumbs up, I did it again. There's a fine line between isolation and taking time to yourself to think. And I think, you tell me, but I think a lot of times now, if I don't answer the phone right away, people are like, oh shit, I think he's using again. I think he's drinking again. We have to be very selfish in our recovery, right? We have to be extremely selfish in that, we remove people, places, and things that don't help us. We get people out of our lives that are negative influences. We get rid of we try to deal with the triggers and get rid of the triggers in our life that are negative. We try to surround ourselves with positive people, positive things, positive activities. I think a lot of time people don't get that, just because we're an addict doesn't mean we're isolating anymore. The isolation is when you don't hear from us like for days, or we don't respond at all, or you can't get a hold of us for like, more than like 10 minutes.
For like a year.
Yeah, like a year, man. Hey, I haven't talked to you. How you been? Oh, I'm good, bro. Yeah, but like, look, for example, I don't talk to my sponsor every week. I don't talk to him every day. I talk to him like once a month. I don't go to meetings like I used to go. I go to my meetings that I need to go to, but I don't go every single day and 3 times a day like I used to. I called my sponsor and said, let's get together today because I was thinking about my dad, and he dropped everything to come get dinner with me, but he could tell just by the tone of the text message that I was struggling a little bit, because I didn't respond right away. So he's like, you all right? I'm like, yeah, man, I'm fine, but I think a lot of times, I think the stigma of addiction and alcoholism, people put a lot of pressure on us once we get sober. That isn't exactly negative, but it's like, we're good. Like we're okay. You know what I mean? Like, I think everybody's so worried about us. They're always worried that we're going to relapse or that we're going to fall backwards and take 3 steps back. It's like, it's a fine line redefining yourself as a human being that doesn't use alcohol or drugs. It's really hard for us to rebuild our lives. I mean, I know I had to train myself how to be sober, and I think, the very important thing, like you said, is that you got to do the same things when you're having a bad day as when you're having a good day. And I think, the people around us, you're going to see the signs when we're isolating. You'll be able to tell. I just think, I don't know. Lately, I just feel like people are worrying a little bit too much, but that's just my thing right now, dealing with the shit that I'm dealing with. People think I'm going to drink right away.
Yeah,
I trained them that way, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think it's like part of it I get because, we used to turn to alcohol or whatever it was for anything. But I totally get what you're saying. We work so hard to turn our life around. And I think maybe some people don't understand that, and that's maybe why they assume that we're going to go back sometimes, or they think that we might, or they're really stressed out that we might and it can be frustrating, I think, sometimes because, and I've had my girlfriend say it to me, I hope you never go back. And I get it. I get where the concern comes from. But at the same time, I'm like, don't you see what I'm doing to stay sober? Don't you? Like, I'm working hard and I have been consistently for years. Like I'm putting in effort here. It's like, it's.
And the recipe is a bad idea because why change something that works, right? Like, why eliminate things that have worked for you for 5 years, or for me I'm coming up on 2 years. I don't see any reason why anybody should stop doing what they do to stay sober if it works. I mean, why take a chance?
Yeah, it's too risky. And I don't want to, I think you're totally right. I just don't want to mess with it. I don't know what I would mess with first. And the hard work that I've been putting in, like I'm perfectly fine with continuing to put in that work because of the freedom that I've got because of it. Like I don't want to mess with this. I don't want to take any chances. And honestly, I'm scared sometimes when I hear people go out after years. And this kind of touches back on the comment that you made earlier about our relapse always seem to get worse. They just always seem to get worse. I heard that addiction was progressive. Didn't really understand that in the beginning until I lived it. And I think that's kind of what happens to us sometimes when we first get sober. Maybe we go to meetings for the first time. Maybe we start getting involved in some type of recovery program, whatever that is, whichever recovery program you choose to do. And I don't know, man. It's like, I don't want to mess with it. I do not want to mess with what's going on. And those relapses always get worse. And I'm scared to go out after this much time because I know that it's never going to be good. It was never good before. Yeah. And now I have all this clean time. And if I went out now, I think the shame and the regret of going out, I think it would be hard to make it back into recovery.
I think you're a lot like me in that, I think we've talked a little bit. You definitely have had a longer run with in and out of recovery. I got sober a couple times, and finally got my shit together. But I think a lot of times, you're more of let's do this. You're more of a 12-step guy than I am, right? You run a couple meetings, you still are pretty active in AA. I go, but I'm not as active as I used to be. And maybe you can't answer this, maybe you can't, but so say you're going through what I'm going through right now. You just lost somebody who's very important to you, and you want to utilize the 12 steps to try to help your way through it. I'm a strong believer that I do the 12 steps, but I don't recognize I'm doing it. It's not like, a lot of people say like, well, I 9th step myself today. I did my steps today. I worked through it from step 1 through 12. Like, I don't think that way. I have a bad day, I check myself, right? Like, so making sure I'm doing the right things, I don't put the 12 steps on it. So if you were to put the 12 steps around it, how would you deal with loss utilizing the 12 steps? Like, what would be something you might do utilizing the 12 steps?
I think if I was to look at dealing with, grief or loss, and I had to apply the 12 steps to it, I think I'd be looking at the grief and loss, the situation. I just replace alcohol with the situation. So I am powerless over this situation. I have no control over it. I'm not God. I can't say when people live, when people pass. I'm powerless over the situation. And then if you were doing it based off the 12 steps, you'd have to find a power to deal with that. That'd be connecting to God, higher power, good karma, positive energy, the beach, whatever it is. And doing that prayer meditation that you talked about, and I think it would definitely have to involve calling the mentor, calling your good friend, calling the sponsor, talking to them about it. But I think, and then of course it'd have to have service in there. It'd have to have going out and trying to help someone else out, whatever that is, trying to get your mind off of what you're going through by feeling the power of getting out of yourself and helping someone else out. I do want to touch on what you said, though. I hear people put the 12 steps on a lot of stuff, but I think that Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever 12-step program that you work, a lot of the concepts, the spiritual concepts and the things that you practice in that book, in that 12-step program, they didn't invent. Confession's been around forever. Service has been around forever. People have been living through honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness forever. There's so much stuff that I think maybe the 12-step world kind of gets credit for, but I think a lot of the spiritual concepts, a lot of the practices that they are really trying to teach and that I've taken a part of has been in religious stuff for years. Has, people that have been living good lives without drugs and alcohol, and that don't even do the 12-step stuff, they do a lot of the things that are in the 12 steps.
I agree.
The step 10 where you're, okay, look, you piss someone off today, you do something messed up, you lash out, you yell at someone, you punch someone, you do something to cause wreckage in someone's life. Most people with a level head don't want to walk around carrying that stress of what went on through that day. And so what do? They'll go to someone and say, look, I messed up. I was wrong. Is there any way I can fix this? Or they'll try and clean up some of the areas of their past where maybe they've had a resentment towards someone. Maybe they've been pissed off at someone. Maybe they haven't talked to a family member for a lot of years. And they're thinking, man, this bothers me on a day-to-day basis. It seems to bother me that I don't have this good connection with someone that I used to be friends with. So what do? They meet up with them. Maybe they go to dinner. Maybe they go to lunch. Maybe they just meet somewhere and walk around. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's even just a text. But they'll clear it up. They'll make an amends to them, so.
I agree. I think the 12 steps, AA, NA, I think the 12 steps is a way to live to be a better human being. I think normal people practice this shit without thinking about it. Just like you said, when a normal person has a bad day, they don't get all freaked out about it and lose their shit. What they go is, fucking shit happened today. I'll deal with it. Whatever, no big deal. But it's the same thing. Like for me, long story short, my mother reached out to me after 10 years of not talking to her, and I think her message was something like, one of the problems about talking about your mother on the podcast is that she might be listening and sees things differently. And I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't respond. And then,
she said that to you?
Yeah, she sent me a message saying that. And I get it. We have an estranged relationship. We haven't talked in a long time because of certain things that happened, and we both have different opinions on how it happened. She's not a bad person. She's a very good person. She just, it is what it is. But then I get another message because I talk, I think one of the episodes I did, I said, I think the 12 steps can be applied to a lot of things in life. And the next message I got was, how would you apply the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous to parenting? And I'm like, shit. Challenge accepted. I'm not a father, but I think I want to touch on that at some point. But I think the key of what I'm getting at is that, just like you said, the 12 steps is basically, AA's 12 steps is two guys decided, hey, listen, let's put this shit on fucking paper. Let's give people a guideline. Let's give them a plan, a suggested plan of recovery, right? Let's give them some ideas that if they do these things, they're going to feel better. Their life is going to get better. And if you look at the 12 steps, if you do those things, how could your life get worse? I don't think it's possible. I honestly don't think it's possible. Hey, I give up control. I stop trying to do everything myself. I admit that I have a problem and I deal with it. I'm not a dickhead to everybody. When I am, I apologize. I go out there and try to do things for other people. Holy shit, that's what humanity is. Treating people the way you want to be treated and helping other people. That's what we should all be doing anyway. And it took me, 49 years to figure this shit out.
Yeah, and I think that's another great point. It's a lot of the stuff is stuff that we probably, should be doing anyway, or at least I should have.
You learn it
right.
Confirmed. Seriously, it's in the church from day one.
I think it's good for people that have tried to get sober on their own. They don't know too many people that are sober. Maybe they've burned a lot of relationships. Maybe they're not welcome anywhere. Maybe they haven't gone to church before. That's just not their thing. They've tried that, and maybe that wasn't their thing. They don't have any other type of support network. And so they go in and they just don't know what's going on with them. They know that they drink an hour after they swear they'll never drink again, like you touched on earlier. And then all of a sudden they go to this place where now they're surrounded by people that have the same problems going on, but now have a solution. And what I think the 12-step stuff does, I think it takes a lot of stuff that, other people just do normally. But I think what it does is it's formatted for someone who needs a start at sobriety and doesn't have any way that they know to go about it. And I,
It's
and
like
I think
Healthy Living for Dummies 101.
it's exactly.
Yeah.
It's like one of those books, like Getting
Yeah, we should
Sober
bring
for
that book.
Dummies.
Recovery for Stupid People. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, dude. Like, like I said, we met through social media and we just met because we're both trying to do the same thing. Now, granted, my podcast has gone a little different. It's not strictly, addiction and mental health. It's a lot of different things. Um, but I think, once again, you have a very good take on things. One of the reasons I like working with you is because, you get it. You get the big picture. It's not just about staying sober. It's about staying sober and being happy and living a good life. There's so many people out there that are dry drunks or, aren't using, but they're fucking miserable. Like they hate their lives. They want to put a bullet in their mouths every fucking day. You know, how do you stay happy? Like I know what I do, but I want to know, what do you do? Because you dealt with drugs, right? So we have a little bit different recovery stories. How do you stay happy? I mean, for me, it's just like, I'm just happy not drinking. Like, honestly, I'm better not drinking, so I'm happy.
Yeah, I think I went through so much pain and addiction, and I think with the opiate stuff, it was such a poor level of existence. I think I stay happier today. Number one, I don't ever forget how bad it was. I realized that at almost 5 years sober, it does not matter. I start messing around, get a bad attitude, start treating people like shit, make one or even maybe a couple or a few bad decisions. I could be right back there. So I think I stay happy today by kind of like we talked about earlier, keeping up with the things that have got me to this point. Try and spend a little bit of time every day thinking about where I was at. I came into recovery after an overdose. My dad had to give me CPR for 10 minutes. It was the most embarrassing thing. I was so close to not making it. And I don't ever want to forget that. I needed that pain. I try and always remember how bad it was, because when I'm having a bad day today, what I call a bad day today, which is like, oh, work was stressful. It's nothing compared to what it used to be. So
Yeah,
I
you're
would say,
up on the floor with a needle sticking out of your arm.
yeah, it's like things were so bad before that now I stay grateful. I don't forget how bad it was. I always try and practice gratitude, because I think at the end of the day, people like us that have made it out of addiction, no matter how hard life gets, we're experiencing something that not everyone experiences. I think a lot of times we can forget that so many people don't ever even attempt to get sober, let alone get some sobriety time. And I'd say some other things that I do is I make sure me personally, I have to exercise. That's definitely part of my routine. I have to have balance. I have to make sure that there's part of the week where I am not doing anything, because I've learned some hard lessons in recovery about just getting too busy, having too much on my plate. I mistook being insanely busy as productive, and I've learned some hard lessons from that. And I'd say I just continue to stay connected as well, man. Service is a big part for me. I love reaching out to those that are still suffering, and I think what that does is it makes me feel better, because I'm getting out of myself and doing something for someone else and trying to help with my experience. But I think what it also does, which could be even just as important, is it reminds me of how bad it was out there. Because when my head tells me, look, are you missing out? Like, remember how much fun you used to have? I'll forget how bad it was. My
Yeah,
head will tell me that
always remember the good shit.
always remember the good shit.
You see
And
that shit going on right now. What the fuck?
dude, I've never seen that. I've seen
I've heard
the
good feelings and the things, so fireworks blow up. Like, oh, great. Hey, thank
I've
you,
seen
Macworld.
I,
Thank you so much.
I've seen the thumbs up. I've
Uh,
never seen fucking fireworks coming out of your ass before. It's
oh,
crazy.
fuck, man. It cracks me up, dude. Oh, man, yeah, you said something really important there. The service work. A lot of people in AA, I think that service work is the last step of the process. To me, it was the first. Like outside of admitting that I was helpless against alcohol, my life was fucking miserable. Like it was service work. Example, like I have business cards for the podcast. I put them in the gyms I go to. I drop them off in grocery stores. I don't expect anybody to ever call and say, "Hey, I want to be on your show." Um, but I got a DM from a guy who just moved to Pittsburgh like 2 months ago. I got a DM yesterday, and he's like, "I picked up your card at the gym." It was like a day after I dropped him off. He's like, "I picked up your card at the gym. I've been listening to your shit. Hey man, good. I like it." I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" He's like, "Well, I just moved to Pittsburgh, and you know, I don't really know anybody." I said, "Well, let's grab coffee." So we grabbed coffee, and we hung out a little bit, and he's got somebody else to talk to now when he's here. It's as little as just being outside yourself for 5 minutes and realizing that somebody out there has it worse than you do. And there's something you can. I hate this fucking computer. I think it's going off my voice when I say good things. It gives me the fucking thumbs up. I'm gonna stop saying good. But like now, this guy has someone he can talk to that can help him navigate the city and help him navigate the transition into Pittsburgh. And I don't know too much about the guy, but it's as little as just getting outside yourself for 5 minutes and saying, "Hey, somebody out there is struggling. What can I do to help that person?" Even if it's just to be a voice on the phone, even if it's just to respond to a DM. Like we get so tied up in addiction, like you said before, where everything is about us and everything is about what we need and what we want. And we forget that, the world doesn't revolve around us. We're just a small piece of this fucking puzzle. And, if we're not out there on a daily trying to help other people, we are going to fail in recovery. I am going to fail in recovery if I don't try to help other people, because when I don't help other people, I feel like shit and I get angry at myself. And then all the bad feelings come back because I'm going back into who I was. And I think it's really important what you said is you can never forget where you were and how bad it got. And we have to remember that there's other people out there that are in that position right now and that could use a pat on the back or a friendly voice or even just a cup of coffee. And I think if anybody takes anything away from what we're talking about today, because we're kind of going all over the place, is be nice to other people. Like seriously, just be nice to other people. It's that simple. You see somebody struggling and you can help them, help them. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to for me is my sobriety at the end of the day is based in whether I can put my selfish needs aside and help someone else. As long as I can do that, I will stay sober. But the minute I lose that ability to help others and to try to do something selfless, that's when I'm going to relapse. 100%.
Oh, I totally agree, and I loved how you put that. That's how we continue on. That's how we stay grateful for our journey. That's how we pay it forward. That's how. The thing that I really love that you said is, and I think a lot of people, at least me, when I first got sober, and I used to hear people talking about service work. I thought that meant I had to work all of these 12 steps, or I had to sign up for some elaborate thing at church, or I had to be like tutoring people, or I thought it had to be some
Like another project.
professional.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
something else you had to tie into your schedule.
yeah, some big thing, some big commitment in order to qualify as service. And I loved how you said sometimes it could just be smiling at someone, saying hi to someone, sending a text. I can't tell you how many times I have been stuck in depression, which for me, it doesn't happen all the time anymore, but it would go on for like 3 days, and I'd be working out and I'd be calling people and I'd go to meetings and I'd do all this stuff and I'd be trying to come out of it. And sometimes it was just a simple text from someone that sparked up some conversation, and by the time we were done talking, I was out of it. So I think that's a great point of it doesn't take much. It does not take much to make a difference in someone else's life. And you never know what someone's going through. And I think a lot of us in addiction, at least for me, I suffered in silence. And it was so hard for me to raise my hand and tell someone what was going on. It was so hard for me to ask for help. But it's nice to, I don't know, it's just nice to make a difference in someone's life, and it doesn't have to be much. And you don't have to be sober for multiple years in order to make a difference either. You could have day one helping someone else out who's got 2 hours sober.
I agree. It's all about putting me aside. As long as I put me aside, I can always do better things. Um, let's wrap this thing up because it's getting kind of late. I know you got to work in the morning, but you know, everybody out there. So we're going to be doing this. We're going to try to do this. What do you think? Like the first Wednesday of every month, put one out. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, first Monday at 7 p.m. We're going to try to put these out. Um, I think we're going to call this the Sober Roundtable. So, we're not going to start a new website because we both have websites and we're going to leave those alone. We're going to come to you guys once a month. Me and Drew are going to get together. And, if you want to suggest a topic for us to talk about, you can either go to my website, which is Steel City Roundtable Podcast.com, or you can go to Drew's website, put it out there for him.
thesoberfixpodcast.com.
Yeah, you can reach us at either one of our websites, and we're in contact throughout the course of the week and through the month. So, if you have something you think we should talk about, or if you even have some feedback for us, just let us know what you're thinking. We're doing this for you guys. We're doing this because we're hoping that, at least I am, and Drew, I'm sure you're going to tell everybody what you're thinking at the end. I want to help other people avoid what I've gone through. So if you just take one thing from this today, the one takeaway I have for you is just remember that you're not the only one that's suffering. There's other people out there that could use help, a kind gesture. Just be aware that other people need your help.
Yeah, man, I love that. Mark, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's been a lot of fun. It's perfect because we're both people that love podcasting and we love talking to people that are going through stuff and I think it's just we're here to dive into some topics. We're here to talk about addiction, whatever you guys want to talk about, mental health related. We don't care. We'd love to be able to talk about it. We'd love to give you any experience that we have. Hopefully you can relate. But at the end of the day, we just appreciate you coming on and taking the time to check it out. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have you follow. Check out some other content if you like it. Check out our social media and let us know what battles you're winning. I'm sure there's something that's going on in your life that you've been able to turn around, whether that's addiction, whether that's mental health related stuff, whether it's the law enforcement stuff that Mark talks about on his podcast.
Yeah, I mean,
we'd love to hear from you guys.
You opened the door saying you were arrested, so we're definitely going to have a conversation about law enforcement.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we'll have some fun. But listen, guys, I love you. Drew loves you. Reach out to us. Let us know what you think. And we're going to put this one out. This is the first in a long line. I hope Drew and I will be working together for a long time. That's the goal. But we love you guys. There's always a seat for you. The Sober Fix is always there for you, too. I'm just a smart ass. All right. Peace, love, and hair. Bam. Peace out.